Anyway, I think you know me, Greg Howes, and then Damon Hernandez, of course, of our AEC Hackathon, Stefan Schneider. I actually work with him at CutMyTimber, a fabricator, and then Shaan, Hurley, Autodesk. The way I'd like to actually start the conversation, I guess I'd have each of you introduce, well, let's do it in a different way. I want to ask Damon first, the executive director of the AEC Hackathon. Could you identify some lessons learned or what you've seen in 40 AEC hackathons? What do you see evolving or what has changed since the first one in 2013? I know it's a very general discussion.
Sure. Well, to run through that quickly, I guess the amount of people from the construction industry, AEC, not just construction, but that are using technology, that has changed. Before it was very much how many people are from tech, how many people are from AEC, and that was always different hands coming up from different peoples with small overlap. And now that's usually a bulk of the audience. So that's pretty cool. That's something I've noticed. It's changed a lot. Another thing that's interesting to see is what are the concerns for the local industries, right? So for example, in Shanghai and in China, there are many different people from the construction companies that are involved in the hackathon that are looking for solutions that incorporate blockchain. And so going to these different regions, you see what are the interests from not only just the developers and then the people who are looking at technology solutions, but what are the asks and the needs from the people in those local industries coming from those trades, and then where does that vary, where does that overlap, and then how are people approaching it? Because in different places, for example, and I won't go too long so we can hear from the others, but in some places in the US, it seems to be very much that, you hear a solution that's presented and it's like, well, we're using your 3D data and it's very high level. We're over in Europe, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, Greg, with the ones that you've attended, that they're specifically saying this is how we're using IFC and things like that. And so it's less of this 30,000-foot view of what we'd like to see the industry, and it's much closer down because they're adopting certain workflows or certain standards that enforce that and kind of bring it more into the mainstream. So I'd say at the very quick, those are probably the things, as a person who's been to almost all of them, I've observed.
And a question for Stefan. From Switzerland, educated there, worked there in the industry, grew up as a carpenter with a master carpenter as a father, but worked there, then spent, I think, 7 years traveling around everywhere in Canada and the US helping factories automate, use computer-aided manufacturing from remote, very small towns in northern Canada or the eastern side of the US to the whole West Coast. And now we have this mass explosion in mass timber and automation. So how do you see, why isn't automation being adopted faster here in the Pacific Northwest where we have the most trees? How do we get there?
Well, first of all, I don't think the issue is the trees, it's the people, just to get started there. And then second, I may want to start with the good things. It's you say, why is it not? I would say it's very much right now. And there's a lot of reasons, but it's, for me, it was always kind of, I don't know, almost became sort of my life mission. But I grew up watching my father, how hard he had to work to get something somewhat right. And then, when I was little, I saw those first CNC machines came up. Mostly this is all in the wood world. The steel world already kind of sort of had that, but it was mostly small formats. And what we see now is this is really becoming a standard, and not just in wood, but with steel and fiberglass and others. And so on a thing, I mean, there's a lot of individual machines now that are out there, and a lot of stuff is now automated. What I don't see yet is the automation basically for assembly. So we're always talking about cutting machines and how to produce a piece, but every house has like hundreds of thousands of pieces, and how do they all go together, and how do they all integrate? And pretty quickly you're talking with different trades, and I think there's a huge lack there where stuff isn't planned through, and a house isn't really designed as a system, and that makes automation really hard. So what we see, or what needs to happen and is happening, is two things. It's like more standardization, not just in everybody builds the same house, but the way we do things in the process and connections and whatnot. And then on the other hand, it's like, mostly software. I mean, everybody always like, oh, how accurate is your machine? And, and stuff is like, none of that is really that critical. It's what's critical is the software that drives this thing, and how fast can we create data to make, that machine run the way we want. So, and we're seeing that too. It's like those software tools keep getting better. And, one of the things that I've seen, two things that I've observed the last, I want to say 10 years or 15 years. It used to be that those machines would be really good if you would have, like that chair here. You want to do 10,000 of those chairs, and you have one guy programming, designing it for weeks, and then you have a code, and then that chair gets machined and whatnot. And so those machines made sense when you have big orders of the same piece. But in construction, we never have that. A lot of pieces, it's few pieces are exactly the same, and so those machines need to be more flexible. That's something we see now. Now it turned around. Now we're using technology for the stuff that normal people can't do anymore. How do you make a cut on a 16 by 48 inch beam, and how do you have it square and stuff? That's hard to even lay out. And so that's that shift from machines becoming from just doing a lot of volume and dumb stuff to do really difficult stuff. So that's positive to see. And then also, I think on the market with economy, we see that too. It's like labor rates are going up, building materials cost more, so we have to basically save time and materials in order to be competitive, and technology certainly helps there on both of those ends.
And I'll just start with a question for Shaan. I think, we're really lucky to have a 200-person group Autodesk group in Portland in a new headquarters, and they support a lot of innovation in that community in-house. And I can't begin to keep track of all the things Autodesk does. I'm just really happy they're there. I'm really happy that he's in the CTO stuff with manufacturing. Andrew Anagnos, the new CEO, really supportive of industrialized construction and all of this automation. So I think it's really a great time to see that development. And just like to hear from Shaan. I know this is a big. I don't even know what the question is. An Autodesk perspective on construction becoming a more technology industry.
It's a loaded question. I mean, I've been with Autodesk for 22 years, and I be honest here, I don't know everything we do either. We're in everything, but what we're seeing now is a shift. We've recognized it in the company as a real strategic move, where we're seeing AEC's materials and labor are all-time high of cost and low availability of people. So things have got to come, and you got to be more efficient with the materials. If they're more costly and harder to get, you've got to be better at how you use those. And so Autodesk has taken the tact of finding ways to automate tasks, spot errors, eliminate risk in construction and design, because that will ultimately help the designers, the owner, builders in the market. I think a lot of people are kind of looking at what happens if the market turns down again. It'll get a lot tougher, and so we hear a lot of people trying to figure out what kind of technology can help them optimize their businesses. I mean, it's not something where we're just going to have robots waltz in and build buildings, although there is some of that in research going on. We do need to think about how we use the material, off-site construction, industrialized construction. Manufacturing techniques for AEC is huge. A lot of the things that Stefan does here, he's using CAM, using in an AEC industry, but doing building systems just like we do manufactured systems or have for many years. Those techniques are built into our tools, and Autodesk is one of those companies that not only do we have the AEC tools like Revit, but we've also got manufacturing tools like Inventor and Fusion, CAM software as well. So if we can put all those together in ways that we can make it more efficient and less waste, less risk, manage construction, I think that's a win-win for everybody. It has to happen.
I know you also have questions for one another. I have unlimited questions for Autodesk or down the automation. And I guess here's one I would like to actually. Damon primarily, I first met him like 12 years ago, and his world was the 3D web. open standards, 3D data, interoperability, and I still think he primarily, you can define yourself, lives in that world, but as the whole, that continues to explode with XR and gaming, how do you see living in that world day to day and going to all of these events? Where is that interacting with construction?
Yeah, so as I think I mentioned quickly for those that were here last night, so my day job is at Samsung Research, and so I'm on the web platform team. And we build the internet browser for Samsung, which is much like why Apple does it, right? When you control the software and hardware stack, you can do additional things. And so being able to explore the way that anyone interfacing with the web, right? Because I think that even though I've been focused on Web 3D for most of my career, it really is not about the isolation of the 3D, right? There's that web component in it. And so where I think that it makes sense is much like I've shared with some of the people here, is that construction specifically, and then just the built environment professions, it's very collaborative. And what I feel that's unique about the way that the web and 3D data on the web, that really becomes not just representational, but I think also of all the 2D data systems, right? So that's the thing, is like, yes, I can walk into this space and look at this space, but the real value comes behind the value of being able to click that beam and then find out all the information about that, right? And so this 3D representation model becomes a GUI for all of that additional 2D data that I see that, you know, construction and other trades have. And being able to put that in context. So from a web perspective, I get excited because now it's not just about how do I load in a 3D model and make that optimized. It's about how do I load in a 3D model that has pricing data and you know, scheduling data and 4D and 5D, and then responsibility and ownership. Who's on call for this? You know, who's responsible for this? And then seeing how with the advancements of the technologies that I primarily focus on at Samsung, which is augmented reality and virtual reality, but through the web experience, we're seeing this shift where people who are starting to play with these technologies in a very proof of concept realm, and that's what I see is with these immersive technologies, they're stuck in POC limbo. People are finding value in them, but because they don't know the proper way to integrate them maybe into their systems as smoothly, they get stuck in this is what our research lab is doing. But it's not about what is your research lab doing or your innovation lab doing, but it's like, what are the guys that are every day improving process, much like the hackers here. And so I think the web makes it a little bit more open because everyone, you know, if I were to pull a show of hands in here, how many people are using web-based services? Probably everyone is going to raise their hands. But if I say how many people in here are using VR, AR services, that's not going to be the same amount of hands. So this convergence that I'm seeing is more about you have data. You have 3D data and 2D data. Y'all need to collaborate on that data. You need it to be multi-user, and you need to be able to display it in many different form factions. And so the main factor that most people have are devices. So for me, I think what's cool is that we're starting to get at a stage of technology where I can do my job here, I can collaborate, and all of us can do our job on our phones. And then if any of us don't understand it, we can bring in these other technologies. And then to see where the visualization connects because of things like what Autodesk is doing, where it's not about just the bit side of things, it's about how can I push that through people like Stefan, right, into the atoms part of things, right, to where now I have something that's real. And so that's where I hope that we look at truly an immersive web. It's not about, oh, I'm in VR and AR. It's more of like I'm in this environment where I can pull in sensor data and all this other stuff. So, yeah.
I'd like to piggyback on what Damon has there. As far as the collaborative spatial environments, it's really important. What I've been noticing for the last couple of years, and kind of a little, it's one of those risks and costs on a construction site are out-of-date drawings and errors. If we can get 5G data in a construction site connected to AR, why do we need drawings, or installation manuals? That kind of stuff will change it. There's a perfect example in the Portland office when we were constructing this large staircase. It was complex. The woodworker looked at the drawings and the Navisworks model and was like, I don't know what you're doing here. We grabbed the construction company, it was Fortis, they grabbed their HoloLens and dropped it on his head with the BIM model in there, and the guy had never seen that before, and he looks around, and it was like, whoa, whoa, and then he goes, I'm going to start over there, I'll lay my materials over there, and it was in 15 seconds, and I was just like, was I just punked? This is crazy. But it dawned on me that having that kind of information at your fingertips or your retinas is really, it can be helpful, you know? Always know when you have the latest information. It's not for everybody on the construction site, but a lot of them. But just think about if you're wiring a complex pump, that pump may be, or a blower, maybe a $100,000 blower, and you're out there wiring it up. If you can overlay the wiring schematic, you know you're not going to make a transposed mistake looking down at the paper, mistaking maybe your coffee spill on there. It's, oh yeah, it's a brown wire. It's things like that that could really reduce the risk and the cost in construction. Drawings and the wrong issue out there on the floor is huge.
And Stefan, I know you have an opinion.
We'll get you goggles.
For once, I have the same opinion there. No, but it's I think the drawing, it's not so much the inconvenience of the drawings, but it's just we see that half of the stuff that one really needs to know is not on the drawing. It's like, how do you get that much information on a 2D piece of paper and still have it accessible really fast? And we see that. I get those 550-page PDFs that just happened this week, and then you have to somehow find the detail, and it's like nothing is linked, and you scroll from this page to the next one and back to the first one to find out that it's just not there. And I think that's where those tools and technologies really need to be, because it's, instead of having that crazy paper stack, or PDF is just as bad. We would want to see, 3D data and all the information behind it, not just the model, but everything else.
If you could just throw a gesture and clear layers out of there just to see the information you want.
Yeah. And then the next step, you said, well, that guy just within 15 seconds said, oh, this here and this there. And I think that's a challenge for companies like Autodesk, or another challenge, but a huge opportunity, because there's probably very few of guys with his background and knowledge and experience. And so now how can you capture that experience and put that into the software so the guy that doesn't have that, can also benefit from that? And yes, and not just that, but it's basically, it's like, what did that guy do last time? Send that back and then propose it for the next guy. And we see that. I get a lot. 2 people come to me with a drawing, and it takes me 30 seconds to say, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, and you're 80 or 90% there. And it's just like, oh, if we knew that, we would have designed it different. And so I think by having that information available early on in the design phase, that would save a lot of headache and money down the road. And I think that's if I'd be Autodesk, that's where I'd push my efforts there.
I think we'll start a project called Project Stefan AI.
I don't say.
We'll have a simulated. They'd be like, don't do it that way, do it that way.
Yeah, I'm good at that. No, but I know my stuff, but that's not even 0.5% of building a house. But the electrician has opinion, and the HVAC guy, and this and that, and it's like, it's hard to get 10 people together in the same table, and if they're really smart and good people, then there's all the ego issues. And so now if you can have that in a software, then you don't have those ego issues, and again, it's available for all your users.
Well, there's a lot of smart people out in the audience, so I think it would be, you want to?
Real quick, just one thing that I'd like to say to their point, as far as technology, because I think this is crucial. How many people in here are millennial? Raise your hand. Okay, that's like 5. All right. And so that to me are the interfaces that we need to really start looking at. And that's the technology. You shouldn't be asking people who aren't the workforce coming in. And I think that where technology is making the biggest waves right now in some industries, and it's going to hit construction hard, is in the training, right? It's the fact that millennials, construction, or go try to be the next Zuckerberg. What do you think they're going to choose, right? But if they're starting to see that they can train with more innovative technology, so it's not, I'm going to go and be the guy that I see waking up at 6 o'clock, like hanging off the side of a building as far as a technology person, right? It's more of saying, oh, wow, I'm going to go learn how to be a craftsman or have this skill, and I'm learning it through these crazy immersive devices, right, or whatever it is. But I'm learning it in a language that makes more sense to me. as a person who's coming from that generation. And so that's what I think is neat, is that the barriers to adoption, we should not change the way that the new generation is coming in, that they have to learn the old school way because we did it that way. Hell no. Do it the way that works for them. Use the technologies that speak their language.
It's an opportunity.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
I'd love to speak to that. The high school teacher in the room. Your problem is that most high school teachers are not tech savvy.
Right.
And so they don't know to tell the high school students about this stuff. And then the high school students have already decided what they're doing by the time they leave high school. You need to connect with the high schools.
To a great point. So that's where I think that fabrication things like, and I'll let Shaan, but just to echo, because a guy, for example, in the Bay Area named Danny Beasley goes in and sets up these fab labs, and we've literally ran wires to help. And you can't call it, I think, wood shop anymore because that has too much of a negative connotation to it. So it's kind of like, but it is, that's ultimately what it is, but just with newer tools. Shaan, I'm sure you have.
I totally agree with you. We try and reach every teacher. It's probably been 7 years ago that we released all of our software free to all students and teachers around the world. It's not to get future customers. It'd be nice, but our former CEO used to say, is it a bad thing if there's another engineer, or architect, or scientist, or artist? I mean, no, it's a good thing. But we've got Tinkercad that's for kids. We've got students.autodesk.com. There's learning curriculum in there for them. There's resources. We're trying to attract all the teachers we can to say, listen, if you need our software, if you need our assistance, if you need local stuff, we're there. We recognize that we need to shape those people, and students into all these different trades and technologies. And it's not all just to be an engineer and architect. It's also the people that are, be out on the construction site. But that is the challenge, is that, kids, there's a lot of people that are like, hey, they're not standing in line to go out there and stack bricks. It's tough. So we've got to change the ways that buildings are made and do more with less people out there.
So I got something I can add to that. So it's not a question, but adding on to what you're talking about. I've been working with some of the unions here on the West Coast for outreach. They'll have days where it's like at the union training centers, and I'll go in, volunteer and show like virtual reality and BIM and holograms, right? And there's these different stations. And it will just be a day of fun for the kids, right? For the kids to come through the union, and they're high school students, and they're now opening up a path for the high school students. They're raising awareness of the opportunity of going through trade school, going to join a union instead of going to college, because you're not going to stack that debt like instantly. You're going to make decent wage straight out of trade school. So I'm seeing the unions doing it, but it would be awesome to see like the big software companies and hardware companies also partaking in that type of event, to show that there's this, it's almost like a shiny hook.
We are doing it with a bunch of union places. We just had PlanGrid out at a bunch of trade colleges and union training centers. It's a scale issue for Autodesk. It's an important thing that we do. It's hard to reach everybody, and I'd be happy to talk to you after we talk.
For Unity, we have education and training programs. We have relationships with universities across the globe. So internationally, Unity is becoming a standard curriculum, in addition to high schools as well and grade schools. And I know that there might be a school either here in Seattle or in Portland where children will build like projects.
I know there are some
it's
schools that are
great.
way ahead of where my school's
Yeah,
at.
so I'm happy to introduce you to our education department. They're doing really wonderful things, and so I'd love to share with you. And software is free for education.
Just real quick though, to pair on that, because the issue I have with Samsung, which is a little bit different than Autodesk, right, is that I need volume. I don't need you as a school coming and telling me, hey, come and engage. I need you going to your whole district and then pushing as a collective of teachers coming and saying, hey, our district would like to do this, and then as a big company, because it's like when people come up to me and they're like, hey, I got this really cool idea for something that you could add to your device that would make it better, and I'm like, great, how many millions of units can you commit to, right? And I know that's kind of a BS answer, but that is the truth from a lot of these when you're a hardware, not necessarily a software, But when something is a cost that's not software, then that would be a great way to engage. But that would be what we would need from at least a hardware perspective.
And piggybacking off of what she was talking about with the age, understanding of it. I come from the engineering community that is part of the group that builds, the AEC sector, what they call the MEP, mechanical engineering plumbing. The average age of that sector is still right around 54 years old. So there is that big detachment that says that a lot of the new wave innovations are still going to be done with paper drawings and a lot, AutoCAD, just because of the fact that there's this, the age group has been established at that age. So there is this hesitancy, let's say.
And a challenge for only the next 20 years.
Just don't become
Like-
those
like-
guys, everybody at 40 and up, just don't become the next.
So I'm a general contractor in Sequim. My guys, plumber, electrician, sheetrock painters, have been with me 12 to 15 years. They are, half all of them are retired. I'm on my third career and I'm addressing this exact problem about tools in schools and how to develop the next generation of hard skills where we're putting steel to steel every day, welding. So I have a case, it's a display case of the tools and what I do with wood bending for kids in schools. Last month I met with our superintendent of schools and the CTE director of Washington State with my case, and they like my case. So I'd love to share it with you, and
Please do.
Be a long road, but we need this.
Yeah, everybody's got to make an effort in that. I'll still go one-to-one. I don't care. Anybody can email me or anything. I'll help to my best effort. We all have an investment to make in the future, and it's the people that are coming up that you really need to pass that on to and light those fires.
I'm not going to make any friends here, but I would like to suggest that this is the number one problem. We're still trying to do shit the same way we've done it forever.
Yes, sir.
We're baking the cake over and over and over, but we're rotating it 4 degrees every time we put it back together.
Depends on what kitchen and what country you're cooking in.
Is that gluten-free?
To some degree. So I'm going to challenge this brain trust in the front of the room to this. In 1940, we had 400 plus automobile manufacturers in the United States. By 1960, we had 3. Is that the only solution in the building industry? From a scalability perspective, which you all have mentioned a number of times, and many of us have identified as this as being a challenge, that it's going to have to be done by that level of industrialization?
There's more population, there's more requirements, there's more housing needs. We've got a lot of people that don't even have housing. Something's got to change. The cost of housing's gone crazy. We can't do it the same way we've always done it. We've got to try different things, think about things differently. There's no easy answer. The future of work, at Autodesk, we're thinking about not only the future of design, future of manufacturing, we're also thinking about the future of work. How are people going to work in the future? It's really important to consider that. But there's a big change coming in the industry, and that's what we're trying to be involved in.
I would say, to answer your question, Steve, I don't think any of us up here have the answer, or if we did, it's not the right answer. Okay, this goes back to, it's like when you watch people in the 50s depict the year 2000, right? It still has this 50s flair. You're asking, what do people who have done things the same way think we need to do to change things for the future? Don't start with us. That's rule number 1. Go to those 6 people who raised their hand, who give a shit about construction, that's why they're here, and say, how do you think you would improve this? Because they are, from a stat I read, the largest population in the US right now. Don't ask me, ask them. Because I'm going to give you what I'm rooted in answer, which is the 50s version of 2000.
I wasn't from the 50s, but my...
I just feel like we rearranged the deck chairs on Titanic a lot of people were sinking, and that's what I want to
Go ask people on a new boat.
I do think we see a dramatic change, because one of the issues with automation and systems is, there's 2 problems. People have a bad idea. I mean, in Europe, if you say, hey, I'm in a prefab house, typically that's also a passive house or a high-performance house from an energy demand point of view. So they're proud of that. Here, if you say, I have a prefab house, that's kind of like, oh, you live in a container box. And so that this whole mindset of like, okay, I'm going to be in that, plywood box, basically. So that's one of the problems. And a lot of people, when they build a house, that's a big thing for them, and they're proud of it, and they want to have something to be proud of. The other thing is it's a money thing. There is much better building systems and much better ways of doing that, but so far it never really penciled out that much. And that's, it may penciled out in certain specific regions, like the Bay Area, where it's really, really expensive. But overall, in North America, it didn't pencil out. We did that in Switzerland when I was I was 16 and started my apprenticeship, and there was like everything was geared towards that, just because it's like we can't afford to run up and down like the scaffolding all day long, and just building a scaffold is too expensive. And so over there we had really high labor rate. We didn't have like machines with no insurance and nothing on the side. I mean, there's just like cheap labor was just not available there, and still isn't. And we see that in Northern Europe too, like Finland and Sweden. And so certainly it's a different math now. Certainly it's like, well, it makes sense to spend millions of dollars in equipment and automate that. And I think that the way this is going, and again, it's like there's a labor shortage, so the labor cost goes up. There's a lot of government guidance and things that add cost to it. I mean, every morning when I'm 7 o'clock, you go to a building site, there's like 30 people standing there listening to a safety procedure and stuff. That all costs money too. And then every time you want to go up climbing up on a truck, you have to be strapped on. And so there's a lot of things that just 10 years ago weren't needed, and now that's not a choice anymore. And that's all stuff that inside a building factory you don't really have that, or like we don't have to climb up like scaffolds and stuff. So I do see that shifting, not by choice, and I think most people wouldn't care how their house is built as long as it's built well and high quality, and they can afford it.
So I'm curious real quick, so to something that you said, kind of based on this, just to piggyback. So it sounds like y'all are saying that there's a labor shortage of people with good skills. And so do you feel that maybe this is the time where, like when you were 16 and you saw that the cost of labor was super high, that you're kind of seeing that pushed y'all as Switzerland to start going to these processes, that maybe we might be right now in a situation that's fertile for that, because you're seeing this happening, that this might be a time where that's more possible because of this high cost to build, low percentage of people with like the actual skills to do it, not just low skilled labor and things like that. You think this is a good time?
I don't know. I think a lot of things in life boil down to money. Everybody has their ideas, what's cool and what they would like, and then the reality comes when the bill comes, and there's, oh yeah, never mind. And we see that with food, and we see that with tools, and I think that will do it. Switzerland is and was very different. I mean, to give you an example, I did an apprenticeship from 16 to 19. I got my final degree as a certified carpenter, and I made more money with 19 than I did like 5 years later as a certified engineer. So that the gap between that, there is no cheap labor. So if you're working, you're making pretty good money, and then if you're really smart, you don't see those crazy salaries. Expect the Swiss banks maybe, but overall that the range is way less, and so that was always kind of an issue, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, we also didn't really have those skills. A large construction project would have maybe 100 units there. Here they're talking about 3,000 units and things like that. So that's also something that maybe changes a little bit.
And I remember we had at the AEC Hackathon in Munich, some of the professors there had been studying automation a lot in robotics, and patterns they're identified is automation typically comes in highly regulated markets with expensive labor. And to raise productivity and be able to attract qualified workers, you have to raise productivity through automation. And when I've been looking, where is automation going to happen fastest? It is going to be in those highly automated, expensive market with housing shortages, because that's really the most practical way to solve the problem and meet the quality standards in well-regulated markets, rather than I'm going to raise productivity by lowering wages or throwing more low-cost labor at it. So that's why I think we've seen more of that derived from Europe and Nordic countries, and also countries like Switzerland. And the thing I've seen, the automation happening, like the German automotive industry, and a lot of the robotics also, whether it's ABB or KUKA, or in our mass timber or CLT, almost all of the machines are also built in Europe, as is a lot of the CAM software. So rather than reinvent the wheel, we need local housing, local jobs. We should use the best tools to create those. And if those tools come from another country, we should use those, but we can still use local resources, for example, like our wood.
In the Bay Area, I had a tour of a factory. It's called Factory OS. And they were spurred back into business. They were developers over years in the San Francisco market. They knew how to build. And Google spurred them. They said, we have workers we can't house. We can't get people to come here. So they invested in the company in order to build off-site construction. When you think about off-site, instead of having a plumber or somebody doing each different room in, say, a hotel or an apartment complex, they're doing it all at a station, and they're using actual union trades in their shop. They're bringing them into that place, bringing them out of the jobs, the job sites. They're working really well, but it's that they have that goal of they got to bring costs down, and it's one way to tackle the growing costs. I know that in San Francisco, a lot of the building permits take so long that in that time frame, some of the developers are like, we're out, At a year and a half, well, my materials have doubled now. The budget I had to build that building is blown before you even dig. So something's got to be done, and there's a lot of hard decisions to be made. I live in Portland. They're starting to infill in lots and stuff. I don't know how I feel about that yet, but we do have a problem, and it's labor, it's materials, it's everything, and automation helps address a lot of that. Somebody was talking yesterday about Sears homes. There's kit homes that used to go out and people put them up. They're all over the United States, and there's still some out there. It's kind of that all over again. That addressed the World War II, crunch and the need for homes. I think we kind of need that again. The wasted material, right? When you have a factory that brings in the materials, instead of at the job site where they're just cutting and throwing on a burn pile or, into a box, it's, they think about every little cut they make so that they're not wasting the materials. And then they think, oh, and over on that line over there, they've got it, they can use that material over there.
Sounds like a Swiss, I know.
Yes.
I want to maybe real quick. I know we have a lot of questions, but I think the bigger thing or the bigger advantage from offsite and factory built systems really is not the automation. The automation is great too, but I know a lot of shops that it's amazing how much they spit out on kind of a manual process as long as they have a process. And that's the biggest issue. Like non-construction site here has a process and nothing is figured out. And by bringing it off-site and prefab, you really have to plan everything through before you start. And I think that's the biggest gain there you can have. Like when you do the stuff on a computer, it's like, does that really make sense? Should we move that? And I'm a little frustrated at times with the design community where things cannot be negotiated down just because that's how I want it. And I was like, yeah, that's great. That's 30% of the cost. And I see that in a lot of plans. And I always say that the more you pay for your engineer and your architect, the more the building is going to cost to build it. It's not that the fee you pay them doesn't matter. It's what the cost after. But really planning it through and kind of streamlining it, that's where there's a lot of value. And that's, I think that's a low-hanging fruit.
So I'm kind of going to ask, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the question about automation and say, which kind of automation future do you see being, and sort of the future? Is it going to be, a Tesla future? Is it going to be a Lyft future or an Amazon future? Right, the Tesla future, you've got everything built in a data factory, right? And it's all sort of like off-site, pre-built kind of stuff, and then you assemble on site or something like that, right? Hence, the Uber Lyft future is you've got, the existing contractors go and rent a robot and stick build on site, but it's all built by the robots or something like that, or more of it done so, and maybe there's some big people who kind of help the robot out. And then there's the Amazon kind of world where a drone delivers everything to your door, and it's all done automatically on site, right? Do you imagine, like, which of these three kind of features do you think will actually happen, and why?
I think there's a fourth,
Okay.
right? So Factory OS that I mentioned, they don't have any robots. They said, we know how to build houses. We're just building them inside of a factory where we can think about the process much like you manufacture a car. They can control everything, yeah. They said, we don't need to inject that kind of automation. That's awesome. They will, but once they want to get everything down and yes. Yeah. But I don't know. I think it's each market, it's each builder, I don't think there's going to be one. I don't know if we're going to have giant manufacturing robots, spitting out truckloads of houses going to places. Everybody's still trying to figure out what this means. I know that at Stanford recently, there was some crazy interest. You couldn't even find a seat in the place. It was full. And it was the people that you wouldn't normally expect to be in that industrialized construction conference, they were there. Everybody was listening because everybody knows that it's a hot topic. I don't know. I can't predict that one. I'm a technologist, not a wizard.
First of all, I think that's a really good question, and I think, but that's me personally. I don't know either. The answer is like probably none of us, nobody here probably has the answer. But the way I see it, I think we'll see all of that. There's going to be the Teslas that going to do huge things. And we see that in Europe. There's IKEA starts building kits and stuff. And so they're going to have their own system. And the house will be a lot more than just a house. There's going to be technology embedded and energy systems, where your house now turns into a power plant. We already see that too. You add so many solar cells to it that you're actually producing power for you and everybody else around. So I think we'll see that. But we also see, if you take that room, and I have no idea, I'm just doing a guess, I want to say 100,000 components in that room. If you look at every screw, every brick, maybe more. And so what we need to do if we do offsite, and in order to manage that, we need to bring that 100,000 components to maybe 1,000 components, and then it's a lot more manageable. So to do that, we do modules, we do component groups. So like that ductwork, that would be a prefab component, and then there's going to be a company that just makes those corners of that ductwork. Maybe the big pipe is from somewhere else because they're set up for that, or maybe it's a big shop that will do it all, and you'll see that all over. Like we already do. You buy the windows from a window guy, and a door that's maybe a different company, and so I think what we do is we kind of split the layers down to fewer components, and then companies will buy that. And I think we will see on-site assembly of those components, and ideally that's what I'm pushing and kind of R&Ding, like we want to just click it together. We don't want to weld on site and glue on site. Everything needs to be, so it can click together. And so I think we'll see that, and I think we'll also see where there's temporary factories maybe that will set up and just basically final assembly type line. So there's a new development over here, 500 homes, so we're going to set up shop and just kind of put that together. I could see things like that happening. But again, I don't know. And I do think we see a little bit of that already, but I think we'll see more of that.
Our employees were amazed at Stefan. He was involved in a building that was assembled near our office, about 200 feet away. And the employees would go over to the windows like, oh, look, here comes another truck. And they would see him like put it up, and they go, that's so different than how construction has been done. So you're kind of like giant, you're tinker toys.
I always liked Legos, and I still really believe in that. If we can boil this down, and a Lego brick, you can put it this way or the other way, it doesn't matter. It's like the ratio is always standardized, and you have small bricks and long bricks, and I think we can do that with building components. And that was sort of, with that building, that was the idea. And you didn't see anybody drill there. There's no bolts. We had 4 welded assembly, which I finally gave up. I said no on-shop or on-site welding. It's not really needed. But overall, that really sped up the process. We did all the work in the shop, but it's, at least we didn't get wet in the rain.
You had a question here.
So my question is, I spent about 7 years in construction, and I remember that when the government, it's me or Big Brother. So I wonder, is it changing at all? way I see it is city and county governments are just getting bigger and thicker and thicker and thicker of compliance that the others have to do, and like the amount of hoops that they have to jump through is insanity. Can't even the city inspector keep up with the technology you throw at them? Probably takes to get some of these things like approved, like.
No, right now I think most can't. But that's the reality. I mean, I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but it's, there's always people that are really with it, and there's some that are not at all, and then there's some that are really with it, fight it, and push it back, and I think we have all of that.
Yeah, I know of a situation where a bunch of these houses were done for a community that didn't have houses. They're still covered in tarps while they try and figure out what to do with the inspection fees. Because these $60,000 a unit houses for people were $30,000 in permits. What do you do?
They make sure that you pay for putting in the street and whatever, and the lighting and
yeah, a gas connection or a sewer connection, a water connection. I think in municipalities, and just this is my own personal opinion, being a homeowner, I think they've been strapped by different tax laws and everything, so they're just finding ways that they can kind of supplement their general budgets, and sometimes it seems like it's a little crazy. Like, you guys just hooked up one little 1-inch line, and I just got a $9,000 bill. That doesn't make sense to me. I could have done that myself.
Yeah, I think he was up first.
I kind of have a question, and then kind of like some things that I'm fascinated by to kind of like hear your guys' ideas too, but I think like hearing about like the automation, the manufacturing, the skills, first and foremost, the point that you had, Stefan, about pretty much the Lego blocks and everything, I'm most fascinated by like how you're pairing, it sounds crazy, but like unskilled labor with consumer perception. So I think like, what I mean by that is like, what I think is really odd going on in the industry is that we're trying to create more efficient systems. However, we're playing to the consumer perception. So I think one of what you guys talked about is, like the level like standardization, but also what Stefan said, like we haven't really adopted those systems because of how we kind of like downplayed prefabricated in manufacturing here in the United States. And so I guess kind of like what I'm fascinated by is that like how we can almost like empower people to get into the trades by almost like less skilled labor to be able to put components together. And like utilizing technology to say like, hey, you don't need 30 years of experience to put this staircase together. These are just better components for you to do that. And I like that what you said about kind of like the suppliers and everything. For the past like probably 2 years, my dad is in construction, and I keep telling him, I'm like, prefab probably needs to be niched down, and all of those guys are going to become the new subcontractors, and then you're going to build collaboration software around the new generation of subcontractors where actually are just suppliers. And so I'm kind of curious of what you guys think of what like the manufacturing and like where all of that like intertwines, because I feel like people are just trying to figure out and like stack buildings, yet perception and consumerism isn't there, especially when millennials want customization, not cookie cutter homes, and are skipping starter homes. So like where does that fit in?
Yeah, that's our goal. Also, one thing I always am amazed, people's like, oh, I want a standard home. I don't want a box like the neighbor's box and stuff. But, if you look at cars, or if you look at, machines, I'm more into machinery and stuff, but they're all built using standard components. Like a complex mechanical system today, nobody makes their own custom-sized bolt. It's either a 3/4 inch bolt or a 5/8 or a 1 inch, but there's certain standard sizes. That doesn't mean that every machine looks the same exact way. There's just certain things to pick from, and I think that's what we need to do with walls, with roof panels, with other systems, and that's something that I was kind of sort of impressed when I first came to America, this whole dimensional framing thing, because we didn't have that in Europe. You'd engineer the size you need, and then the sawmill is highly automated, and they could, within seconds, they could retool, and instead of making a 2x, they could make a 3x or 2.5x or whatever. You'd order what you want, they input that, and they mill it. So here, at least with the 2x, it's either 2x6 or 2x4 or 2x8 or whatever it might be, it is standardized. But they're still too small of components, and that's just part of it. I think the whole house, everything needs to be like standardized, and then you have like millions of different variations of basically picking the same standard parts, right? And so I'm not suggesting that everybody builds the same exact house, but having a house that, this kind of type building, and then each corner has a different unique detail and drilling pattern and bolting pattern, that's the kind of stuff I think we should more standardize.
And I want to answer the question too. That's what got me into this. I worked as a builder, then I got frustrated at the slow pace of change and how inefficient it was. So then I worked in tech, and then I got frustrated at sitting in a room emailing the guys I was sitting across from and not talking to anyone all day. And I'm like, okay, I miss building. And looking at it, I said, well, look, I think I want to build a lot of buildings. I want to scale my business and scale, and I want them to be cool buildings and interesting buildings. And I can't learn to become a competent engineer, architect, plumber, all of those things. I need a building system. So who has a efficient process? So I, without those skills, can build really high quality buildings. So to me, I'm process oriented. Therefore, we can enable people through technology and systems to build better, faster, smarter. Question? Yeah,
I just wanted to give my perspective as someone whose career is technology and that it's not fair to be hard on ourselves for not adapting or not be pushing the technology further to our objectives, because technology is not just a straight line that either we are pushing or catching up. It's a little bit more complex than that. For example, for going back to affordable housing, if we could just use really cheap materials and 3D print stuff, or use like Lego bricks, that would be great. But we are not there. The technology is simply not there. Or take into account, for example, why the Tesla Model 3 failed, because the factory was supposed to be fully automated. That's another dimension of it. The technology was there, but Elon Musk didn't take into account how important the human factor was in that. Another case is in housing and in the construction side, there are lives. So again, putting the Tesla example, there are the self-driving cars, or even there is technology there to have fully autonomous airplanes. That's even easier than cars. Why don't we do that? Because it's just too risky. There are many lives at stake. Even though the technology is there, it still needs to be perfected. But there's stuff that we can do, and we are fully responsible for it. For example, take the example of surveyors. When the GNSS and the GPS constellation was coming, surveyors were like, no, that's never going to be a thing. It's not as accurate as, the total station and whatnot. And there was this resistance. And today, there's, 90% of the surveyors rely on GPS equipment for surveying, right? That's the part that we are maybe responsible for. But there are things that are not going to change in a long time, despite all our efforts, right? Like, having materials so cheap and very large 3D printers in which we can just send a bunch of robots and just make buildings without human intervention. That would be the idea. That's not the
there is some of that happening in pockets, and there's also robots that are laying brick, automated system, bridges and things like that. I'm not saying we're going to be in this dystopian robotics world, but we need to look at technology to help make us more efficient and use those materials more wisely and less and reduce risk. Just think about AI or machine learning on the construction site being able to spot common errors over a data set, and go, there's a hole there, just using the camera system to identify safety errors and reduce the risk, or, there's a ladder left out, or Bill's not wearing his helmet, or, they didn't put enough fasteners in these areas. Just monitoring that kind of stuff with technology helps take it off the foreman's head. So I don't think we're going to have an Elon Musk, house plant. I'm not going to debate Elon on that one, but he would make it happen. But
the bottom line is focus on the stuff that we can do now,
right,
which is it's simpler than the stuff that we're thinking in the future, and just leave that for whenever it happens.
We got to stop doing the things the way they've always been done.
Exactly.
Part of it is the perception, because in Elon Musk, he didn't fail. He figured out a way it would work.
Yeah.
And to what you're talking about with drones, and it would be today, we'd be much safer if every aircraft was 100% autonomous. If every car was 100% autonomous. All we hear about are the failures because they sell media.
Yes.
And so the perception problem is the adoption is, no, we're not ready for that yet. Yeah, we are. We're well past being ready for all that technology. So what we have to do is go with the perception problem.
If I may, to echo that, because this is something that I hear a lot of, and I don't speak very loudly about because I'm not in construction, but it really bothers me that I hear everyone say that, oh, as an industry, we're so far behind. When as a person who, I don't have a dog in that fight, so I'm not caught up in your own bias. I'm looking at it as, I know people who are using drones on the job site. Construction is using more VR and AR for process and utility and better sales than gaming and entertainment have, okay? Gaming and entertainment have had 5 years to push these immersive technologies. And it doesn't mean that there aren't people that are building lots of stuff for it, but who's buying headsets because of that stuff? Not many. And that's why even big companies like us are shifting our focus. Facebook is saying we're focusing on enterprise. HTC is saying enterprise, and others. And I've gone around the world enough to say that in the past 5 years, I'm almost this close to fighting people when they say, well, as an industry, we don't adopt technology and we're not innovative. Bullshit. Because more and more architecture firms are using these technologies more than things that we normally think. So I think that a lot of the AEC industry has a perception problem of looking at themselves, because if you are innovating, if you're someone who's in this room, that doesn't apply to you. And then if you aren't innovating, you got 20 years, 30 years left max before you're no longer a factor. So I would pray that everyone leaves from here and understands that y'all are actually way more innovative than you may give your credit for. You may not move as fast or be where you want to be, but please don't discredit the fact that you are moving and adopting these technologies in a way that sticks faster than some of these other industries are.
Let's ask one more question because it's almost 5. David.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what do you think of a design-driven ERP solution?
Yeah. Go for it.
I don't think I got to get a disagreement up here.
And that's rare that I just say yes. You know that.
Yeah, first time.
Not the first. No, I mean, ultimately, that's what we need. We need better systems and we need processes. And I would say, as a final comment, I think the technology is here. It's just, there's just so many pieces and they're not very well connected. But everything that we need to get a lot further in VR is already here. This is not, oh, this needs to be developed or invented and stuff. That stuff is already there. It just needs to be used and connected. Everybody kind of focuses on their little thing, but we need to look much wider what's before that and before this, and then also downstream kind of.
Yeah, and I want to leave a thought. Today with this hackathon, I was happy to have a real estate panel as well. We hadn't really done that before. Mostly it's technology companies and AEC people. And my lesson learned in going to the AEC hackathons in Europe is if the built environment is going to become an innovation platform, an increasing amount of the AEC industry is going to become a manufacturing industry and a technology industry. And when was in Finland or Denmark or Germany, and they say, well, what's going on in Seattle and Silicon Valley? You guys have everything. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, look, you have all the leading technology company, you have fast-growing cities, you have housing shortages, you have early adopter buyers. Crazy Americans will buy a house on the internet, sight unseen. You guys will do all these new things. We're much more conservative than you. And you're focused specifically on wood. You're the biggest wood market in the world, and you have the most productive forest. So what don't you have? And you have scale, and you have capital. Capital that will chase a good idea to scale because you're the world's largest market. And then I'm like, well, I got to give them something back. I'm like, well, hey, Finland or Denmark or Estonia, you're a really small country where everybody's 1 degree of separation. We're a highly fragmented big country. We can't get everyone in a room together. We can't. People are fighting. There's 101 municipalities in the Bay Area alone. And then Denmark, we're in Copenhagen, like, Greg, I put the call out. The furthest drive in Denmark is 5 hours away, so I can get everybody to show up in Copenhagen for a meeting tomorrow. I said, that's your advantage. You can implement change faster in a small market. Our market's so vast. But ultimately, I do believe we've got so many advantages, and especially Seattle, because we're tech, housing demand, green, an AEC industry that's thriving right now, but if we're being driven by Amazon, Microsoft, the tech industry is driving demand both for the campuses and the highly compensated employees. Those would be early adopters of more technology-driven building processes. So I think we do have many advantages, and I hope the Pacific Northwest can emerge as that leader in implementing that. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.